So I really want to talk about the importance of learning another language. You know about this.
Hmm.
Some other people may know about this, but a lot of people don't know about the benefits of learning another language.
Right.
And I just want to ask you really quick before I go into this.
Hmm.
What do you think the benefits are to learning another language that a lot of people are overlooking or don't know about?
Yeah, I always thought about the benefits outside of health, but I know when it comes to health, Alzheimer's is one I keep hearing about.
Yep.
I hear if you lose one of your languages due to Alzheimer's, some sort of memory loss, you can still hold on to the second language or vice versa. Um, but I know there's several benefits to learning another language. I highly encourage it. For those who don't know, I'm bilingual. It took me a while to get to this point. I've been probably speaking a different language now, Spanish specifically, for about 2 years or so, a little bit more, due to a relationship and family I had in a Latin country. But I want to hear about what have you discovered? What are the benefits of speaking another language?
No, for sure. Outside the health stuff like Alzheimer's, I think a big one is just learning about a whole different culture.
Yeah,
Like it's so interesting
yeah,
diving into a whole different culture because that's a big part of learning a language that a lot of people always overlook is that there's a cultural aspect
right.
that you have to learn as well because even though you speak Spanish, I'm pretty sure the Spanish you speak is like different than someone from Spain. You know what I mean? There's different levels of Spanish, just like how there's different levels of English.
Right.
You got the United States English, you got the London English, you got
Yeah.
the Scottish English, Irish. It's all different. But I think just learning about the culture and learning about how different they are and their different customs and how their everyday life is. Because when you're in the United States, you only see the United States. More specifically, when you're in a certain state,
Yeah.
you only see a certain state.
Yeah.
Because even amongst all the states, there's a different culture. You know what I mean? You know this being from Missouri
Right.
versus moving out here and living in LA, California.
Oh yeah.
Two different cities, two different, almost feels like two different countries. You can say, you know what I mean? When people talk about the states and they say they want to live in the states, I'm like, well, where do you want to live? And they're like, they don't know.
Right.
A lot of foreign people don't know where they want to live in the states, and they're like, well, aren't all the states the same? And I'm like, no, they're not. They're all different.
Yep.
They're all, it even towns amongst states, it gets even deeper, are different. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like there's a huge difference between St. Louis and Kansas City.
Of course.
They're both in Missouri. There's a huge difference between Kansas City and Springfield. They're both in Missouri. So I always tell people that at least when learning English, that it's like I always say, to stick with the Midwest English because it's very
I
standard.
say the same. Yeah.
It's very standard. It's very, you can understand it.
Oh, yeah.
We don't have any like slang or anything like that.
Right.
Versus like people from the East Coast. You know what I mean? But
Right.
I mainly just want to like hit on the culture, just learn about the different culture and just expanding your mind. It helps with cognitive. It helps with cognitive reasoning as well.
Right.
It makes you smarter. It opens your brains up. It makes you more creative.
Right.
And it challenges your brain.
Right. And I wish I went back through it before this podcast started because I did learn about 3 different forms of being bilingual. And one of the forms, basically, there's names for each of them. One of the forms is when you're born, you're exposed to both languages at the same time. And so that's going to be your people who maybe first generation here and their parents speak one language, but they're learning the language of the land as well at the same time. There's also another form of that where you are possibly an adult, maybe your late teens, and you have one language, but you acquire another. So you're filtering your second language through your first language. That's how I learned. That's how close friends of mine have learned other languages as well. And each of them have a different effect on the human mind.
That's true.
So the way you acquire a second language has a different effect on the human mind. Now, with time, with persistence, with continuing to spend time with that language, they start to become more parallel and similar. So if you did learn as a child multiple languages, your brain's functioning one way. If you learn a language as a second one as an adult, your brain functions another way. But if you stick with it long enough, to become a little bit more parallel in the sense of your cognitive ability, your working memory, things like that start to balance out a little bit more so. And I really, there's actually a great video on that, which I definitely recommend people to watch after this one, about the effects of a new language on the human mind. And it probably came out 2019, but it's revolutionary. It's actually on the same platform if this is being watched or streamed on YouTube. So
Yeah, dude, that's awesome, man. I agree with all that 100%. And I just remember I went to this really good middle school, and a lot of kids would come to the school not speaking a lot of English because they just moved from their country.
right,
And within a year, I wouldn't say within a year, within like 3 to 4 months, they would start being able to speak more and more and more English. I knew an old girl in 7th grade. She was from Brazil. She speaks Portuguese. Didn't speak no English. She had a translator in there and everything. As the year went on, her English got better and better and better. And I actually went to high school with this girl, and she was speaking English just like everybody else.
wow.
You know what I mean?
So say it again for me. 'Cause I can't. So you went to school with a girl. Beginning, she didn't speak any English.
No.
Right.
And then within a year, she was speaking. This was 7th grade. She was speaking. Her English was better within a year. It was a lot better. She didn't have the translator in class anymore. And then by the time we got to high school, like 2 years later, she was speaking it just like me and you. Of course, she didn't have like an American accent.
Right.
But now, if you hear her American accent is becoming more prominent than her foreign accent.
Wow.
Because she's been here so long.
Yeah.
And that she's been speaking it so long. And I realized that with so many people who moved here at such a like early age, at like 10 or 11, and they immediately get put through this resource school that teaches them English immediately. And I remember when I was working for my old job in Illinois, when I used to go to this gas station, the manager there, she's a Latina. And she told me that the way they taught English was, she said, Josh, we will learn English 7 hours a day. They would put, this was like back in the day, so this was like the 90s. She said that they would put something in this transponder, and it'll put it from Spanish to English, and I would have to repeat it in English, and I have to do that 7 hours. So it'll be different words.
Yeah.
And I have to do that 7 hours a day. And even when she talks, you can still tell that she has a Latina accent.
Right.
But
a Latin accent,
but her she has an American accent. She sounds very American when she talks, but you can tell with certain words.
Yeah.
It hasn't her
left. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a lot of like I think you said it best, like when you have that discipline or that forced discipline, when you have to survive in this new country, this school system and everything. It
changes things.
Yeah, they really you have to, because did you know that English is not the official language of the United States of America? Did you know that?
No.
I didn't know. It's just I don't think the United States has an official language.
No.
It's just everybody speaks English.
I see.
So it's kind of like an unspoken rule, like, hey, if you want to really thrive here and survive, you're gonna have to learn English.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I understand completely. And, for me, what pushed me to first, I know the experience of learning English from scratch, even though I learned English from birth, my first language, obviously. I got to see it up close. People who are close to me learn English, and I got to see the arc of how quickly they adapt that language. And it's fairly quick. It may not feel quick, but it's fairly quick. The same goes for someone who's learning Spanish.
Yeah.
For me, I'm told that I don't have I'm told I don't have an accent really. I don't have like a distinct accent when I speak Spanish. A lot of it has to do with when I was sleeping at night out here, my partner at the time on the phone talking to people and da-da-da-da. So I always heard the Spanish accent, always heard the Mexican accent. I had friends from Venezuela. I had friends from Colombia, Bogota, Argentina. One of my really close friends is from Valencia, España, which is in Spain. So I had quite the variety. And what I'm trying to get at is what pushed me to learn the language was all social reasons, because I didn't want to lose my friends. And it's just so crazy how much of social creatures we are. And so, same for, my partner at the time, she didn't speak English when we met, and I didn't speak Spanish when we met. But our idea of socializing with each other overrode every, preset we had. And and our idea of communicating with each other's families overrode every preset we had. And so therefore our whys were greater to learn a new language. If you're born here in the States, you don't really deal with, it's a hobby for you. You may not learn the second language. It really comes down to your why. And that's a huge part of it. What do you think, how do you think why fits in with discipline?
Why fits in greatly with discipline because that's going to drive you every day. That's going to create that discipline, that instilled focus. And I think another reason, if you don't mind me interjecting on what you said before, another thing on why you learned a new language is because you moved to LA. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You're surrounded by nothing but a lot of Hispanic people. A lot of your friends are.
Kansas City, we have a great Latin population. We have just as much of a Latin population as we have here, crazy enough.
Right. But a majority of the population in the Midwest and in the United States is white and black.
Yeah, definitely like once you leave Kansas City,
Yeah. There's really not a lot of, even though St. Louis has a big Korean population, has a huge Jewish population.
I don't see too many Latin people there.
No, I'm just saying in general, like there's not, what I'm trying to say is that there's not a lot of push to learn a language. No. Because you're surrounded by mostly white and black people.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like I said, in St. Louis, you're surrounded by Jewish people, Koreans, Chinese, Indians, and yes, they're speaking their language and everything, but it's like there's not like a lot. You know what I'm saying? It's mostly white and black.
Right.
So there's not really a lot of push to learn another language, and that's how a lot of Midwest cities are. But like I can tell you that when I moved to California.
Go ahead.
No, even before I moved to California, because I was in Chicago. Chicago has a huge Latin population, has a big Latin population. So when I was in Chicago for a bit, and I used to hear the Latin speak Spanish, it made me want to start speaking Spanish. I had Latin friends in Chicago.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think Chicago is very underrated for its Latin population, because I remember when I was driving.
I heard they have a Latin population.
Dude, it's. I remember when I was with my Uber driver was Latin. All my Uber drivers there have been Latin, just like here. I was like, hey man, does Chicago have like a big Latin population? He's like, oh dude, yes, absolutely. There's a huge Latin population here. He's like, it's not like California, or it's not like, but it's like we have a very, very big Latin population. But dude, outside of Chicago, it's white and black. But
so what language do you find most appealing for you? What language do you want to know?
Well, the language I'm learning right now is Spanish.
Okay.
I'm still learning Spanish. But as far as wanting to know, definitely Russian.
Okay.
Because it's just so, it's the complete opposite of English.
Yeah, Russian, I don't know, is it Germanic language or what is it?
Slavic.
It's Slavic.
Slavic language.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have friends in Moscow, and I'm sure you have friends there too. The world's getting smaller, guys, so we have friends in every country.
That's true.
Or in a lot of countries, I definitely do. I'm gonna say something here in Spanish because I tell this to my teacher all the time, and this is gonna be interesting and funny to those of you who know Spanish, but es muy interesante para mí porque la mayoría de personas de Estados Unidos quien hablan español o sus padres de México o en otro país no saben español. Yo solo saben cómo hablar inglés, nada más. Es raro porque muchas personas piensan que la mayoría de mexicanos hablan español, pero muchas personas no.
Yeah.
Muchas personas no aquí. Posible la media personas hablan español, posible la media no, pero es una rara situación. And I do think it is kind of odd to me. It used to be odd to me because I used to take class with a lot of my friends who were Latinos, and they get back the tests for the Spanish class and they'll fail. I'm like, bro, what's your thing? You know?
Well, it's because they don't know. I met a lot of Latin people who are second generation here or third generation, and their parents they speak fluent Spanish, but they don't speak Spanish.
Sí.
Yeah.
Es la verdad.
And, you know, I just think, I was like, why don't you know, like, I was just curious, why don't you know Spanish? Like, my parents just never taught me.
Well, yeah, and the reason why there's a stigma around speaking two languages at one point, which is so crazy, they actually did tests early on that said that the people who know two languages are slower in both. These are things that are happening in the 50s and the 60s.
Yeah,
so they wrote a huge press paper saying that people who speak two languages are actually like have less cognitive ability, which is the farthest thing from the truth, and that's why it was really heavily discouraged at one point in time. But so there's a stigma around, so parents didn't teach their kids, but now parents are actively
Teaching their kids.
Yeah. Thank God, because I think the world gets smaller the more we know.
Right. I agree.
We can do a part 2 on this, but this is Black Hollywood.
Yeah, gonna be great.
Just one more time. Black man, stat man, black man, stat man, that man, jumping up and I sing, black man, stat man, keep going up, keep climbing up that ramp. Black man, they hating your skin. What? They hating on your skin. They don't want you to win. Black man,